in the assembly so we can get started, and we're gonna get back in onto our agenda items G1, and we're gonna pick up at G1, 4, and 39. Office of the Governor, COVID-19 relief programs, and Department of Health and Human Services, Child and Family Services. And so, who do we have to present that for us? All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Ouellette with the Nevada Division of Child and Family Services. For the record, this work program transfers ARPA funding in the amount of $916,718 to harden the ceilings in one unit within the Desert Willow Treatment Center. Desert Willow is located on our West Charleston campus in Las Vegas and provides services to youth who are severely emotionally disturbed. This is an important project as youth have been breaking the ceiling tiles and using the wiring within it for self-harm and or harm to others. There's also electrical wiring and structural components that they can access and damage. So hardening this unit will increase safety to patients and staff and save the state money in repeatedly repairing the damage. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ouellette. I do believe we have a question, and I think that Assemblywoman Gorlow, do you have a question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Can you talk to me a little bit about with the existing facility with the occupants and how are they going to be impacted during the construction?
Sure. I am going to introduce our Deputy Administrator over Residential Services, Dr. Jackie Wade, to take that question.
Thank you for the question. Currently, they won't be impacted as they're doing the ceiling tiles. It will be done in phases. And so while that unit is being completed, the staff will have the kids on the other unit, and then they will go over to that unit once completed. So it will have very little impact on the service that is being delivered at Desert Willow. Currently, the patients, they have mental health diagnosis and they are severely emotionally disturbed. And so those are the types of patients that are currently served within Desert Willow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on these two items? All right, thank you. I appreciate Ms. Ouellette and Ms. Wade and Ms. Tilley for showing up and helping us out today on these items. So, no questions, no comments. I would take a motion on items 4 and 39. I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, second from Senator Cannizzaro. Any discussion on that motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, aye? Aye. And Assemblyman Hafen's an aye. Any opposed, nay? And motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much for helping us out today, and thank you for being so brief and succinct. And so that takes us to, I believe, 17 and 24. And so we have items 17 and 24. And we want to do G21 with this as well. And so that's Office of the Governor work program, and then Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology work program as the catcher. And so I think we have Director Mitchell with us. And if you could briefly go over what this work program is, and then I probably have just a real quick question on the consultant contract afterwards. And so, but if you could just briefly go over this.
Good morning, good afternoon, Chair Brooks and Vice Chair Carlton. I clearly didn't update with my remarks, and members of the committee. My name is Brian Mitchell. I'm the director of OSIT for the record, and I'm pleased to present this work program for G117 for broadband. I have a few prepared remarks and a couple of slides that I think might help me to be able to introduce our proposal and then provide some background, if I may.
Yeah, it's just a couple of slides. That would be great. And we, I don't know if you've been following along today, but it's been a long one, and 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 we've got a long way to go. So just keep it brief.
Will do. So I'd like to just begin briefly by sharing our vision for these funds. The governor's vision is universal access to broadband that's affordable, reliable, and scalable. And the priorities for spending these funds align with the priorities in the Nevada Recovers framework, as well as in the federal ARPA guidance, specifically access to remote education, healthcare, telemedicine, public safety, justice, workforce, and economic development. A second and equally important goal in using these funds is to use them in the most efficient and effective way possible to connect as many Nevadans as possible. Not only do we want to connect as many Nevadans as possible, but we also want these funds to be used for long-term transformative investments in infrastructure assets that will benefit the state and its citizens for the next 30 to 40 years. As much as possible, we don't want to use these funds on assets that will reach end of life in 5 to 7 years and find ourselves back where we started. This next slide is a little small, and I apologize. But let me just tell you a little bit what we're looking at. This slide represents calculations from a national consulting firm that estimated three things: the number of unserved households in each state, the cost of connecting those households, and then whether a given state would receive sufficient funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law to cover the cost. The largest funding pot that the state will receive for broadband is one we haven't received yet. But we should receive it later this year or early next year. And it's from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. And this chart shows that how much we will receive, as well as how much what our need is. And then for Nevada, we're projected to receive less than half of the funding we need in order to achieve universal access. So I show this just so that I can communicate that we'll need to be very strategic about how we use the funding and use it in the most efficient way possible in order to tackle our broadband problems. I'll just briefly talk about some of the needs that we have. Unserved and underserved areas exist in every community across the state. And we know that during the pandemic, residents were unable to access school, work, healthcare, government services, and reliable information without broadband. And the pandemic also laid bare inequities in our state in terms of access to broadband. I want to make clear that there are needs for broadband in both rural and urban communities. We need more infrastructure in unserved and underserved communities that will scale to meet growing needs for bandwidth. The existing infrastructure that we have will not meet our current or future needs. Now that I've spoken a little bit about the needs, I want to talk a little bit about how we arrived at our plan. As I said earlier, we need to be really strategic about how we use the funds in order to stretch them as far as possible and bring the necessary connectivity to as many Nevadans as possible. There are three main one-time funding sources for broadband from the federal government, and then there are also several recurring sources of broadband that require state match, each with its own set of rules around what can and cannot be funded and what the process is for distributing those funds. So like with many things, there's an optimal order of operations, or putting things in the right sequence will help us to achieve the best results. If used for residential broadband infrastructure, funding for unserved areas must go first. However, ARPA funds allow us to bypass the residential unserved or underserved eligibility criteria for funding if it's being built to a government facility or entity. So by using ARPA funds to connect to community anchor institutions in the first phase, we can build and expand fiber infrastructure to nearly every community in the state. Once that fiber infrastructure is in place, future federal funds focused on last mile investments will be used to expand the fiber networks that we're building with these ARPA funds to connect more residences and businesses. So let's talk a little bit about the investments that we propose. Once we determined that the best way to get fiber into every community was to focus on community anchor institutions and unconnected state facilities, OSID conducted an analysis of unmet needs and arrived at 223 unconnected state facilities. We located each facility and modeled the cost of building fiber to each facility. We prioritized facilities located in unserved and underserved communities that would benefit from fiber infrastructure. With some of the facilities, we're able to use ARPA funds as match to draw down additional federal dollars from other federal and state funding programs. Rather than building these communities with only ARPA dollars, we want to use other federal dollars to the maximum extent possible. And you'll notice that we're almost able to match our ARPA investment one-to-one with this method. Note that not all state facilities are eligible for other federal matching funds. The upcoming BEAD program from the IIJA is a funding source that will focus on last mile investments. It's a $42.5 billion nationwide program, and it's the largest fund the state will receive. The federal government will require us to put up a 25% match. So we estimate that our share of the funds will be around $400 million, and we don't want to leave any of this money on the table. The BEAD Fund is unique in that the federal government will allow states to use federal dollars as matching funds so that we don't have to use state general fund dollars. And so we are proposing a $100 million matching fund for BEAD. Finally, our tribal communities are among the most unserved in the state, and the ARPA request proposed here requests additional funding so that we can connect more of our tribal nations. So as you can see, we anticipate building over 700 miles of fiber, which would be a huge and lasting investment in our state's infrastructure. Finally, I'll just conclude my remarks briefly by talking about some of the benefits. This plan will allow the state to leverage nearly $100 million in non-ARPA funds for broadband. Providers will be more likely to serve unserved and underserved residential areas if they have long-term commitments from community anchor clients. Faster bandwidth improves government services and allows residents to use government services more easily. And we've talked a lot today about state worker recruitment. And so better community bandwidth will help the state to recruit and retrain workers in unserved communities. And then finally, this plan will allow us to begin to work at building fiber into our communities sooner rather than waiting for the FCC to finish up its data fabric map. And so that concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to either provide a brief overview of the second work program, Mr. Chair, or just dive into questions.
I think we'll just dive into questions. My question was around how locations were prioritized, and I think you answered that for me sufficiently. But Assemblywoman Peters has a question as well.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the labor suggested rules and the federal guidelines for ARPA dollars. Can you just speak to how your program had considered those rules and how the development of this project?
I'm not sure I understood your question. Could you clarify for me?
Yeah, sorry, trying to be a little bit brief. So there are some labor requirements for the ARPA dollar allocations and any project that is built, and specifically calling out broadband projects as those who are suggested to have PLAs and other labor agreements in place, Davis-Bacon, wages, et cetera. So can you speak to whether your program, this work plan, or work program has considered those labor suggestions, heavy suggestions, for how you will allocate these grants and make agreements with the folks who are implementing the program?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Peters. Brian Mitchell for the record. The ARPA, the federal ARPA guidance from Treasury specifically exempts broadband funding from Davis-Bacon. And we certainly share the Treasury's goals of having projects that are completed on time, on budget, and at the highest quality possible. And so when we receive all the funding will be delivered via competitive RFPs. And so we'll certainly be looking to make sure that whichever projects we fund will be constructed in a way that will deliver to the state and its citizens a lasting investment.
So purchasing is its own big piece, right? How we what we consider within the purchasing process. But for your work program and the development of this particular plan for implementing broadband across the state, what considerations did you take for those jobs and ensuring that our community's jobs are paying fair wages and are going to entities that are within the state of Nevada? And is that a part of your program, or is that a piece of is it deferred to somebody else when the project goes out for bid? How is that piece of this being implemented?
So, Assemblywoman Peters, Brian Mitchell for the record. The second work program that you'll see, G21, is a work program that will help OSIT to develop the criteria, the specific technical criteria that goes into the work that goes into our RFPs. So the specifics of that hasn't been completely developed yet. Having said that, I think that that we will look to have projects that are that are funded that meet the standards that are outlined in the Treasury's guidance, we can't layer on additional requirements beyond what's in the Treasury guidance.
Vice Chair Carlton?
And thank you. And following up on Ms. Peters, so just because something is exempt doesn't mean we don't have to do it. We can build at Davis-Bacon if the state chooses to do so. And we have some very qualified companies in the state that partner with the labor unions, and they do a very good job, and they do bring it in on time and under budget. We have proven in this state that PLAs work. So I'm just a little concerned that it seems like we're aiming to get away from that. When the whole idea behind bringing these dollars into the state is just to provide the service, but we also want to make sure that it's Nevada companies and Nevada workers that are doing the job, because those are the folks that are going to have to pay the cable bill when they run it the last mile to their house. Because if I understand this program right, once we get it done, we're basically going to turn it over to a company to run it. The state isn't going to do it. So we're going to build it, and then we're going to give it to a company to charge people for it. So I think the least we can do is make sure there's good jobs coming out of it. So can we get any assurances that the labor unions in this state that do this work, that are professionals in this area, will be the ones that'll be on the front line doing a lot of this work? You don't have to guarantee it, but it doesn't mean, just because it's exempt, doesn't mean you don't have to do it.
Vice Chair Carlton, Brian Mitchell for the record. Absolutely, I agree with you that that the highest quality program or the highest quality work should be required in all of these projects, and that in every instance possible that we should be using Nevada workers and Nevada companies. And there's certainly going to be a lot of work. And so I don't want to necessarily guarantee that every single project. I don't know that we can guarantee that every single project, every single worker will be a Nevada worker. There's labor shortages everywhere. Having said that, I think wherever possible, absolutely, we will. There's nothing that would prohibit any of these projects to go to a company that uses any type of labor, including union labor, and certainly I think we'll want to make sure that as much as possible that the work is being done by Nevada companies and Nevada workers. I agree with you there.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. This state was built union, and it needs to be continued to be built union. That's all. That'll be my final word.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And the Treasury guidance doesn't just allow or not require, but it definitely encourages. And it specifically states in the guidance that it encourages that. So might be something to think about. I have another question, and it's around the BEAD funding. Just what's the timeline for receipt and expenditure of that BEAD funding?
Thank you for the question, Chair Brooks. Brian Mitchell for the record. The BEAD funding, so let me walk you through the timeline because it's a little lengthy. So in mid-May, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, within the Department of Commerce, will release the rules, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which has the rules and regulations for the BEAD program. And but at that time, we won't know while we'll know the rules of the program, we won't know what our final allocation of funds is until the Federal Communications Commission completes the National Data Fabric map. And this map will be the map that all federal agencies use from now on in order to allocate any broadband funding. And so that map will have an accounting of how many unserved and underserved and unserved and served households are in Nevada, and our funding allocation will be based on that. So the FCC, it's anticipated that they will release the map in the fall. And then following the release of the map, the FCC will allow for service providers, for states, for any entity to challenge the map. And there will be one or two iterations of challenge before then they arrive at a.
Let me interrupt you real quick.
If
the map is the starting line, where's the finish line?
So I think we will likely, the bottom line is I think with the BEAD Fund, we'll begin probably late winter and early spring to be able to make awards with the BEAD Fund. So we're looking at about like a little less than a year out.
Thank you. Last question. Have you, is there any prohibition, and if not, have you looked at partnering with private the companies out there that are currently doing this and leveraging their private capital? That's kind of a yes or no, too.
Yes.
And so there's existing companies that are doing this, and you are working with them to leverage their private capital being invested right now.
Anytime we can leverage private capital. In fact, I think all of the grants that we or all of the RFPs we put out will have a match requirement, and in order to be competitive, a private company is going to have to have skin in the game.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Senator Tetreault?
Yeah, thanks. I just kind of wanted to dive in here on what was said a little bit earlier, and I just support you guys looking at who would be the most competitive and do the best job, regardless of open shop, closed shop. So I just figured I'd weigh in on that. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from the committee? All right. I would look for a motion for items 17 and 34. Did I say that right? 1724, excuse me. Oh, and G21. So G21, before I get a motion, just very quickly, is that the contractor that you're looking to help create the plan to administer the RFP and rate it and then let contracts? Is that what the purpose of that contractor is?
Senator Brooks, Brian Mitchell, very briefly, the primary purpose of the contract is when we receive bids or when we receive applications, they will help us to do the technical evaluation of the applications. And I can go on and on about all the things that we need to see in the applications in order to feel comfortable funding them. But the bottom line is they'll be our technical expertise.
Thank you. And is there any relationship between the contractor that will be doing the design, if you will, and review, and any of the responding bidders?
Senator Brooks, no, that would not be appropriate.
All right, thank you. And Senator Harris, did you have a question?
I do, Chair, thank you. I have a question on G25. I don't know if we pulled that or if this might be the best time to ask it if I could. Awesome, then I will wait.
Yeah, we're just about to get to that. so
Perfect.
Take it in order.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. All right, I don't have any other questions. Anyone else have any questions? All right, seeing none, I would take a motion to approve both of those items. All three items, excuse me, because pulled to G21. I have a motion from Senator Dennis. I have a second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Any discussion on that motion? All seeing no discussion, all in favor, aye. Aye. And Assemblyman Hafen's an aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Don't go too far. And I think that's everything for item G1. Oh, 16, I'm sorry. So up next, item G1, 16, and 36. This is a picture in a Department of Health and Human Services Public and Behavioral Health Adult Mental Health, Southern Nevada Adult Mental Health Services catcher. And so we should have with us, all right, we should have with us Ms. Sherich and maybe somebody from GFO if necessary, but go right ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Lisa Sherrick for the record. With me today is Ms. Jo Millay, who's the Deputy Administrator for Clinical Services, and will be providing an overview of this work program.
Morning, Chair Brooks and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jo Millay. I'm Deputy Administrator with the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. These work programs, items 16 and 36, is for 4,972,547, and it's for the renovation of the Stein Forensic Facility. Stein Forensic Facility, located in Las Vegas, has multiple small units that are confined in crowded spaces with poor ventilation. What we have found during the pandemic is that that's counterproductive and actually does not mitigate the spread of disease. So our renovations include those of removing a wall between the two units, allowing for larger spaces, less crowding, social distancing, and improved ventilation in those areas. The renovation also includes, includes the use of an additive bathroom in the seclusion rooms, which will provide for some private restrooms in order to seclude those clients that either have COVID or infectious diseases to mitigate the spread. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Millay. Assemblywoman Miller, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Could you explain how the requested renovations would mitigate the spread of COVID-19 or impact facility capacity?
Yes, again, Jimmy for the record. Yes, the units, as I had said, they're very small confined units, about 6 or 7 clients in a very small area. And so it really doesn't allow for the social distancing that is recommended, as CDC recommended, for reducing the spread of disease. So that wall would remove and allow for a larger space within 2 units so that we would have better ventilation, also along with social distancing as well. When we go through those renovations, it will be done in incremental stages, 1 unit at a time, and we have a unit available to move those clients so that programming and treatment will not be affected.
Follow-up, Chair?
Please.
So, as you say, doing the improvements 1 unit at a time, is that part of the plan on how you plan on managing those that will be impacted, that would include the existing facility occupants and the faculty or the facility occupancy. Is that part of the plan of how you would manage those that are impacted during the construction? And is there additional plans that you have to manage and handle this during construction?
Yes, Joe Malay again for the record. Thank you for the question. So we don't expect any impact to the clients as they'll be moved to another unit so that they're very similar, all those units, and it's within that same facility. So programming and treatment would still continue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on items 16 and 36? All right, I see none, so I would take a motion to approve both 16 and 36. I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, a second from Senator Dennis. Do I have any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed, nay? And Assemblyman Hafen is a aye, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and we will move on. Now I believe we can move on to G2. And so we pulled G21 and already processed that, and so I think up next is G5 and 38. And so G5 and 38 is a work program from the Office of the Attorney General as funding a GO-ED program and work program. And with us today, we have Team GO-ED and Director Brown. Go ahead when you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair. It's actually very good to be here in person. I think it's been 3 years since I've sat in this room, and I appreciate this committee's support of GO-ED during the response, relief, and recovery portions of the pandemic. GO-ED's now focused on resiliency measures, and today I'm pleased to bring you an opportunity to add resiliency in the financial sector for small businesses and minority-owned businesses. I'm speaking specifically the opportunity to establish a community development financial institution, commonly known as a CDFI, focused on supporting our minority communities. This is an initiative of the Urban Chamber, and I'm joined by Kevin Evans of Las Vegas today, and Nick Steele through Access Community Capital, who's also with us today. The U.S. Treasury runs the CDFI funds. It seeks to nurture entrepreneurship and support other services in low-income and minority communities by channeling money to local institutions that know these communities best. CDFIs exist as a connector of sorts. Large banks recommend borrowers to CDFIs since they have different lending criteria, and the CDFIs focus on minority communities, encourage partnerships with nonprofit organizations, and deeper bonds with customers. There are over 1,000 CDFIs in the country, but until this year, Nevada only had one CDFI in rural Nevada. This would create Nevada's third CDFI. By comparison, Arizona has 18 CDFIs. The Nevada Plan for Recovery and Resilience, prepared by SRI International, encouraged the expansion of the CDFI network as Nevada has historically been an underbanked state. Karsten Heiss, the GO-ED staff, is with me today to answer questions about the working of a CDFI. Leandra Diosa, the director of our administration, prepared the work program, and we're joined by Ken Evans and Nick Steele, who might address specific questions as to how this would work. The funds would come from the T-Mobile settlement to help set this up. We were introduced to this initiative by Congressman Horsford, and Attorney General Ford and his staff were most cooperative in offering support for this initiative from the settlement fund. And Mr. Chairman, that would conclude my comments.
Thank you. I think we'll jump right into questions, and if any of the team from either the Attorney General's office or your office can answer them if we need them to, they can do that. And I think Senator Harris has a few questions, so go right ahead, Senator.
Thank you so much, Chair. My first question is on G25, and it's specifically about the program through GO-ED to benefit minority and women-owned businesses in the state. In the last session, I passed a bill that broadened that perspective from just women and minority business to also include LGBTQ businesses. And so this is just an ask. I don't know if we can solve this today or how much of the program is already in dry ink. But if you all would be able to possibly consider including LGBTQ businesses as underserved folks as well, I would appreciate that. Is that something we might be able to do? Oh, fantastic.
Hi, Senator. This is Jessica Adair with the Attorney General's office. I can give you reasoning why that particular language is used in the work program. That is because the terms of the settlement agreement that we came to with T-Mobile, in addition to all of the other aspects of the agreement that don't have to do with the funding has to be used for grants that enhance entrepreneurial opportunities for and expand small businesses owned by minorities and women in the state of Nevada. That is why it is limited to those communities. However, I have full faith in GoEd as well as the wonderful people who they're working with the Urban Chamber to make sure that the outreach that they're doing is also reaching those folks who have been historically underserved by traditional banking institutions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I won't tell anybody if you won't. On G238, if that's okay, if I can ask those questions now, Chair?
Yes.
Perfect. What are the program terms and requirements to qualify for the loan program?
This is Carsten Heiser for the record from GoEd, and I'm trying to head off this and then hand it over to the experts. So we are going to seed the CDFI, so we're injecting capital in there. $6 million is the total. 5.7 will be capital injection to run a revolving loan program, and 300,000 will be for technical assistance support. So that's the structure of the deal, so to speak. The revolving loan program consists of microloans, small business term loans, revenue-based financing, and contract financing. And each individual, category has its own requirements. This is why there's no straight answer to this. So microloans vary from 1,000 to 10,000 in size. The rate is fixed between 4% and 8%, average of 6, running between 1 and 3 years in duration. For the small business term loans, they can vary. That's larger, between 10K and 50K. Again, fixed rate between 4 and 8, average 6, 1 to 3 years in duration. Revenue-based financing, 10,000 to 100,000 in size. Again, fixed rate between 4 and 8, average 6. Again, 1 to 3 years in duration. And contract financing, capital loans, larger, maximum 10 to 150K. Again, 4 to 8, average 6%, running 1 to 3 years. I will hand it over to the CEO of Access Community Capital, Mr. Nick Steele, for who could qualify, how you run through the sort of selection process.
Nick Steele for the record. Thank you for the question. The basic criteria for participating in the program starts with the company needs to be a Nevada-based business with a Nevada state business license. I think it's easier to determine what businesses are ineligible, and we follow the guidelines set forth by the U.S. Treasury and the Department of Commerce. And so most of our guidelines mirror what would be the guidelines and requirements by the EDA, or Economic Development Administration. And so some of those that criteria that would exclude a business may be your clearly anything that is not not legal from a federal standpoint. And so that eliminates dispensaries in your cannabis use industries. It also excludes purchases of businesses that are in the lending industries. So we cannot lend to other lenders, for example. It also eliminates businesses that are massage parlors and things of that nature. One of the criteria for us personally that we've adopted is to eliminate or exclude businesses that are in the real estate industry. And we did that for a number of reasons, primarily because we want to focus on supporting small businesses and supporting the working capital that is entailed in helping that business scale and grow. Whereas real estate is a different component and also requires a larger back office to kind of go through the process of liens and the legalities of that nature. And so for us to stay and remain focused on providing financial assistance and technical assistance, but do so in a sustainable manner, meaning without a huge back office, we've streamlined much of our process and approach to lending.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I guess, can you just speak a little bit more to what the terms might look like on these loans? Is there an option for forgiveness? Is it a 5-year loan? Are we looking at 3% interest rate, 10% interest rate?
Nick Steele for the record. So these loans are the terms across all of the loan products are pretty consistent. The rates are between 4% and 8%, with the average target interest rate of 6%. And so of the entire portfolio, we'll look at managing the risk and look at those different interest rates and try to have a target of 6% across the entire portfolio. The terms are between 1 and 3 years. They're non-forgivable, so these are not grants. And in this environment, that's probably one of the first questions that we're already answering to borrowers, is that are these loans forgivable? And the answer is no. These are terms. And to kind of give you a little bit more context, the portfolio is separated and applicants are separated into 2 different paths. We have a startup path and we have an existing business path. So the criteria for that is a little bit different. When we're analyzing and underwriting a startup business, it's more about the credit score of that individual, whether they have a business plan, and it's a little bit more subjective. Anyone going through the startup path actually has to work with a business advisor prior to securing a loan, and those loan sizes are capped right now at $10,000, so they're smaller size because startups are a little bit riskier than their existing businesses. And so one of the things that we do is we'll pair those businesses with a business advisor, whether it's at the MBDA or the SBDC, and they'll have to work through the process of developing a business plan. Then they'll present that to us, and we'll actually go back and forth with that individual to flesh out some areas of underwriting, and then we can proceed with the rest of the loan application. If you're an existing business, it's mainly a cash flow-based underwriting process, and it's very streamlined. We model ourselves after your typical fintech companies, and so instead of developing your traditional organization of setting up a huge back office with lots of underwriters, we've built, and we spent the last 2 years building a loan platform that allows us to directly connect to a business checking account within 5 minutes, analyze the last 12 months of business bank accounts. And so it does some things that your traditional institution may not do. We can check it. We automatically check your Yelp review, for example, if you're a restaurant, and pull in all of those reviews. And so within 5 minutes, we can see the number of NSF fees, your high and low balances on a monthly basis. And then we're really looking at, can you support the debt? Can your cash flow support the amount of debt that we're going to give to you? And at that point, we'll also look at any other areas that we may be able to provide assistance. And that's where we look at the entire ecosystem of business service organizations. So we may refer somebody to SCORE, to the SBDC, or other organizations in conjunction with the financing that we're going to provide.
Thank you. I appreciate your thorough responses. And this may be more appropriate for the motion when it's made, but I'd like to ask you all to provide some type of annual report to us regarding the number of businesses that you've assisted, whether they're minority-owned, women-owned, hopefully LGBTQ businesses as well, that are approved for the loan, the amounts and the terms, so that we can keep an eye on the progress. Please, yes, thank you.
Sure, Nick Steele for the record. So right now we are already partnered with the City of North Las Vegas and lending in the City of North Las Vegas. One of the things that I'm incredibly excited about with working with the Governor's Office is to expand that coverage throughout the entire state. And so what we do now from a reporting requirement standpoint is in line with your federal reporting requirements that are under the auspices of the U.S. Treasury. And we did that to kind of be be consistent from the very beginning, such that when we achieve our CDFI certification, that we're right in line from the very beginning. We kind of took that a step further. I'm a business owner myself and an investor in a number of different businesses, and one of the things that has been incredibly productive for my personal investments in other small businesses has been to increase the accountability of those business owners by having monthly reporting. So instead of waiting for an annual report, we actually provide monthly reporting to our stakeholders and our partners. So on a monthly basis, we provide that reporting, and then we compile that into an annual report at the end of the year.
Are you offering to report to us monthly?
I would
Is that
hope.
what I'm hearing? Everybody else hear that?
I would certainly offer. Nick Steele for the record. I would certainly offer that I can put everyone's emails on our distribution list and and gladly send out our monthly reports. But it's a way of keeping us accountable. And then on an annual basis, we have to, since we are receiving more than $750,000 in federal funds, then we have to actually get a single audit at the end of the year, and that sort of reporting is also incorporated in our requirements under this work program.
Yes, Senator Jessica Adair, for the record, LCB staff asked us after we submitted this work program what our reporting will look like, and will there be reporting? And we had committed to LCB that GoEd will receive reporting from the institution. They will give that reporting to us, and then we will give it to LCB. So that is something that your wise staff at LCB had already identified, and we committed to in the work program process.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Steele, for that explanation. And I have a question from Assemblywoman Peters.
Very, very brief. Massage parlor is an antiquated term, and I just, for the record and for the public, like to clarify that spas are a legitimate business that would be covered. Okay, thank you.
Nick Steele for the record, that's correct.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
I was going to ask us, thank you so much, similar question among reporting, but also highlight, and it's a chance to say something that is, I think, an accomplishment not only for the department, but for the state, is winning the Transparency Award for your website on reporting, because that has been a really big conversation. And looking at the report, something like 96% of other states, when they give abatements or they give out money or loans or these kinds of programs, you don't know where the money lands. You don't know who the recipient is. And so I know that we ask for those reports. I know sometimes we ask for lots of reports. I know that every single legislator here spends all their due diligence and extra time reading those reports. You better. But that your website, especially, especially in the past couple of years, you can find any piece of data, where any money's landing. And so we'll look for that in our hands and on your website as well.
Michael Brown, for the benefit committee members, Majority Leader is recognizing that a group that is typically skeptical of economic development ranked the 50 state economic development agencies by transparency, and Nevada ranked first. And when I was asked by Bloomberg how my colleagues would react to us being first, I said, well, we're not the 19th hole of a golf course. This is a public business, and we'll be transparent, and we'll have suitable reports so the committee understands what happens with this venture.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. Any other questions from the committee? Oh, Vice Chair Carlton, sorry about that.
That's quite all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this might be to Ms. Adair, but so I'm really not sure. So I'm hearing these are loans to businesses. I'm an executive director of a nonprofit. We have a state business license. This might be something that would be handy if I know that there's a grant that will be available, but I have been put in a position to where I have to put the money up front before I can apply for the money for the grant. Is this available to nonprofits, or is it strictly to just businesses? Because we do have a business license, but we're not the typical business. We're in the business of giving things away rather than bringing things in.
Nick Steele for the record. Unfortunately, nonprofits are excluded from our criteria, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. But from an underwriting standpoint, it's hard to underwrite a nonprofit in the same way that we would be consistent with your traditional for-profit businesses.
I'm very disappointed in that because there are a number of instances where I have a grant sitting there waiting for me. I've got right now one for almost $750,000, but I have to come up with the first $25,000 and then be reimbursed for it. So I have to actually go out and fundraise to get the money to help people pay their rents so that I can go get that money back into my coffers and then start the rotation. So I find that to be disappointing. Nonprofits were on the front line in the state during COVID. So I would hope someone in the future will consider them as having an opportunity to do something along this line, because it makes it very difficult for us to serve the folks who knock on our doors who need help.
Thank you, Vice Chair Carlton. Do we have any other questions from the committee for either GoEd or the AG's office or Mr. Steele, Mr. Evans, which thank you for coming up here today and presenting this. Any other questions? All right. Oh, Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question, but a comment. As we're living through this pandemic, I've said this a few times today, we have small businesses that are families who have put their life dreams and finances into that small business in our communities. And sometimes what they need is just that extra lift. And it's not a $50,000 loan or a $100,000 loan. Sometimes it's just that $1,000 loan that the traditional banking institutions do not honor. So I applaud you and I thank you for coming up with a product that can help those families in all of our communities.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Do we have any other questions or comments on these two items? All right, seeing none, I would like a motion that to approve 5 and 38 with a minimum of annual reporting from the AG's office on this program. Oh, I have a motion from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. I have a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed, and we have Assemblyman Hafen as an aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and thank you for the program. So we have item G216 from the Department of Education, and that was requested by Assemblywoman Miller, and so we have with us the Department of Education. I'd like to hear that together with L1, and because L1 is the Tesla contribution to the Department of Education. And so while we got you both here, if I can hear those both together. And please go ahead and talk to us about this particular work program.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Heidi Hartz, and I serve as the Deputy Superintendent for the Student Investment Division at the Department of Education. The work program before you today transfers $6,000 into an operating the operating category, so that we can cover some unanticipated expenses that we've experienced in fiscal year 2022. And we're happy to answer questions about that work program.
Thank you, Ms. Hartz. Go right ahead, Assemblywoman.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. So my question was, and I can't locate it exactly right now in all of these books, but I remember it said a loss. And so I just wanted to know if that loss, and it was for licensing for teachers, if that loss was because there are less teachers applying for licenses, or if it was, so you're saying it's not given to supplement or assist teachers with applying for licenses, it's a loss, and is that due to less teachers applying for licenses?
Heidi Hartz, for the record. The funds that we're transferring in this work program are the result of a fee reduction that we experienced through negotiations with our vendor. We had a period of time in which the vendor was offline, And so as we worked to get back online, they agreed to reduce their cost to accommodate us for the inconvenience. What we're actually seeing is an increase in the number of teachers, particularly substitute teachers, who are seeking to be licensed. And some of those fees, such as banking fees, are actually what's driving up our costs for the current fiscal year.
Quick follow-up. So with that reduction, so the vendor offered a reduction to the department. Was there a reduction to the applicant?
There was not. That, Heidi Hartz, for the record, the fees charged to the applicants remain the same. The savings was applied to the department for our contracted services.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? I know that, I think maybe Assemblywoman Titus might have stepped out, but I know that she had some questions on L1. But we can hear it right now while we're on the subject, and we have the Department of Education here with us. So if you could walk us through L1, that'd be great.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. Vice Chair Carlton, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Joan Ebert. I serve as your State Superintendent of Public Instruction. So this afternoon, the department is requesting approval to accept donation, specifically this donation for $7.5 million from Tesla Incorporated. It's part of the agreement that Tesla provide a total of $37.5 million in Nevada's K-12 supports. Over the last few years, I've had the pleasure of working with Chris Riley, who works with Tesla, to dig in on, I was not here when these funds were made available or contracts were signed, but was very interested in how the work began, and then also how we can continue to move the work forward. So in working with Tesla and the Department of Education, what has come out of that is, and you have before you a report that Tesla provided you, along with your massive books that you have on your table today. But I would just point to one part of it is that they have agreed to moving forward, working with a group made up of educators and community and business leaders, as well as the Department of Education, to identify funding moving forward. So in the past, they did have initial group that set forth a path. They're continuing those funds, and we will look at how to move forward together. I would just highlight one program really quickly, and that is FIRST Robotics. That has been extremely successful for our state and our students. The engagement that has been created has been bar none. We have world competitors within our state. I'm very proud of the work that has transpired. It started actually in 2005, but was accelerated through the donations from Tesla. I also want to thank this committee. You accelerated the work. We knew that that robotics was not available in every single K-12 school. And so when the ARP funds were made available, we came to you and asked for $4 million to be set aside so that now 100% of our schools over the next few years will have access to robotics. And there's nothing better than watching a first grader actually program a little robot to follow that line and then all the way through competition, which transpired actually in Southern Nevada this last weekend. And we have several teams which are going to the world competition. There are other programs that we can go into, but I will pause there knowing that you have a lot of work yet to do this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the members on these two items? Senator Dennis.
No question, just a comment, because I helped coach the Rancho robotics team, and it wouldn't have been possible had it not been from the money that came from Tesla, because there's an ongoing cost for not only for the materials to build the robot, but all the other things that go along with that. And the Rancho was able to be able to get tools and things like that so that they could set something up to move forward. And they didn't just commit to 1 year; they committed to, I think it was like 5 years, 5 or 6 years, enough to get something going. So I know that the donations that they have been able to do have helped some of these schools that, and we also worked with several of the other schools that were on the same, had received the same donations. And, these were kids that wouldn't have gotten an opportunity to work on robotics had it not been for the opportunity to get those funding. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. And I think that there's a young Mr. Dennis who's a pretty proficient robotic builder and operator, if I recall. Any other questions or comments from the committee on these two items? All right. With that, I would take a motion to approve both of these items. That would be item L1 and G235. No, excuse me, 16. I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, and I have a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussion on the motion? All right, I see none. All in favor, aye. Aye. Assemblyman Havens, and aye. All opposed, nay. And there is none, and motion passes unanimously, and we can move on to the next item on our agenda. Thank you so much. All right, next item is G235 from the Department of Business and Industry, Housing Division. And let me see where we're at. It looks as if we have Mr. Acroft is back and Mr. Holliday's back. And it looks like we have Ms. Campbell and team. So if you want to walk us through that briefly, that work program, and I think we have a couple questions.
Thank you, Chair Brooks, Vice Chair Carlton, members of the committee. Thanks for having me again. This will be certainly quicker and I hope less painful for everyone. For the record, Steve Acroft, Administrator of the Nevada Housing Division. Thank you for your time and consideration of the acceptance of the Homeowner Assistance Funds provided in the American Rescue Plan. The Homeowner Assistance Fund, or HAF, was established to mitigate financial hardships associated with the coronavirus pandemic by providing funds for the purpose of preventing homeowner mortgage delinquencies, defaults, foreclosures, loss of utilities or home energy services, and displacements of homeowners experiencing financial hardship after January 21st, 2020, through qualified expenses related to mortgages and housing. The state of Nevada will receive a total of $121 million in HAF. The IFC approved the acceptance of the initial 10% last summer. Today's pending approval is for the balance of the funding. The Housing Division has engaged with the Nevada Affordable Housing Assistance Corporation, or NAHAC, to be the entity to disperse these funds. The NAHAC leadership team has had great experience with U.S. Treasury homeowner assistance programs. They've already initiated the pilot program, and pending this approval of funds, they will fully deploy the Treasury-approved plan. With that overview, we stand ready to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Senator Dondero Loop, did you have a question?
Thank you very much. You beat me to raising my hand. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here to present again. For the purpose of just the general and administrative costs, can you explain the need for the 18.1 million, or the kind of the 15% of the total program funding?
Thank you for the question. I'll actually defer to Reese Campbell on that, if she can answer that.
We cannot hear you. Nope, still can't hear you. Since we are kind of under a time crunch here, we're going to table this. You guys figure it out, and we're going to go to the next four. And that is 41, 42, 54, and 60. And that is Health and Human Services, Aging and Disability. And Healthcare Financing and Policy.
Good afternoon. This is Dina Schmidt with Aging and Disability Services, and I can certainly start with items 41 and 42.
That would be great. Thank you.
So certainly, these two work programs are requesting the addition of home and community-based reinvestment funds to support the home and community-based capacity building and long-term support services rebalancing efforts. The funds will be used to add one unclassified agency manager position. This position will focus on activities to enhance and expand and strengthen our home and community-based services across the state. The COVID pandemic has certainly highlighted the gaps in these areas and in our aging network across the state. We have a need for leadership to improve coordination, collaboration across the aging network. We've seen increases for demand, home delivered meals, medication delivery, access to healthcare, and certainly increased concerns over social isolation. Additionally, we recognize the need to focus on improving our home and community-based services to meet the growing demands and the growing number of older adults and those with disabilities needing our services. This position will focus solely on activities that are allowable. As outlined in the guidance by CMS, these activities include identifying and implementing new home and community-based services, efforts towards no wrong door systems, person-centered practices, quality and improvement efforts, amongst many other items. But that is what the goal of this position will be going forward, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
That's right. We do have a question from Vice Chair Carlton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So, given the temporary nature of this funding, because it expires in 2024, why are we bringing on a regular person and not hiring a temporary for it?
So our intention, thank you for the question, Dina Schmidt, for the record. We wanted to take advantage of the funding that's available right now. It is 100% federally funded, and create an unclassified position. Again, like I mentioned during, is that COVID pandemic really has identified the long-term need for leadership in our organization to move forward with efforts around home and community-based. So our efforts will be after the March 2024 ending of this funding. We anticipate putting a request into our budget to support the activities. This agency manager will be overseeing community-based care activities as well as our Older Americans Act activities. Both of those programs have federal funding available for administrative costs, and so we anticipate being able to cover the majority of this position's costs going forward through those federal funding sources.
And
this really is a way to maximize those federal funds.
Thank you for clarifying that, because it almost reads as if you would have to come back in another budget cycle to get funding. But if you're going to be able to access the federal dollars now and then the other funding streams afterwards, then this would not be where you would have to. We've been very cautious, and we've said over and over again, please don't ask for something with these federal dollars that we can't afford to pay for in the future. But I'm hearing you say that there are other federal dollars there to pay for this down the road.
Dina Schmidt, for the record, that is correct. There may be, I want to be very clear, there may be a small general fund portion, but we believe we'll be able to put that will be absorbed in our current budget.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that.
Thank you, Administrator Schmidt. Do we have any other questions on this particular item on 41 and 42 from any of the members? We take all four of these together, but really I think that was the only questions we had on those four work programs. So if there are no other questions, I would take a motion to approve 41, 42, 54, and 60.
So moved.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton. A second from Senator Cannizzaro. Any discussion on that motion? All right, I see no discussion on the motion. So all in favor, aye. Aye. And Assemblyman Hafen is an aye. All opposed, nay. No nays, so motion carries and passes unanimously. And we can move on. Oh, are you guys good up there? Ms. Campbell, are you all good? All right. Okay, so we'll go back to that. And that was agenda item G235. And is that right? Yeah, that's right. And take it away.
Do I need to repeat the question, Chair?
Oh, actually, probably would be helpful to repeat the question, Senator Dondero. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome back. I was just asking if you could let us know the purpose of the general and administrative costs to that 18.1 million, or the 15% of the total program, if you could explain the need for that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Yes, wonderful. Third time is the charm. Thank you so much for your patience. Good afternoon, Chairman Brooks and members of the committee. My name is Verice Campbell, for the record, VeriseCampbell. I'm the CEO for Nevada Affordable Housing Assistance Corporation, also known as NAHAC. I believe the question on deck is to explain the $18 million for the general and admin expenses. The majority of those expenses are going to be compensation, so that would include staffing. And then second to that would be professional services. Those are our vendors, legal team, and various other vendors. And then you'll see that there's approximately $3 million included in the budget for technology and communications. That is largely for the portal that we had developed that is currently in operation, and it allows homeowners to actually complete their applications online.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, we'll go to questions from the committee. I believe I have Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice Chair. I just had a couple of questions. I was looking at the information that was provided about the Nevada Affordable Housing Assistance Corporation and the Homeowner Assistance Fund. And I think when we got this information, as of when we received it, there weren't any applications that had yet been completed and funded. It indicated that there were some that were under review. So I wondered if you could provide an update on the number of homeowner applications that have been completed and funded as of today.
Yes, Verice Campbell again for the record. To date, we have yet to fund any files. However, applications initiated is 1,269. Those that are actually pending approval, that number is about 428. We are working out the eligibility pieces of the program, and we do expect to actually start funding within the next couple of weeks.
And could I ask a follow-up, Madam Vice Chair? Thank you so much. And then my other question was, just generally, you've given us the numbers of applications. We know what the funding is, but what metrics are in place by which you'll measure the success of the Homeowners Assistance Fund program?
With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Veronica Lewis.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman Brooks and members of the committee. My name is Veronica Lewis. For the record, that is VeronicaLewis. I'm the project manager for Nevada Affordable Housing Assistance Corporation. And part of this assistance will require the oversight by both the Nevada Housing Division and by Treasury. Part of the requirements is to provide statistics on files that are being funded, the average funding amount, and ensuring that the vast majority of the homeowners that are receiving assistance meets those that are in low to medium poverty level. There are specific numbers that are, or information defined by Treasury as being 100% of the area median income or lower. That will be the primary focus on the homeowners that will be assisted. However, there will be a small, and that will be also the priority that we will be applying into our portal, which does allow us to identify those that are in a higher need. So we will continue to monitor the files and ensure that those that are in the low to moderate income household are prioritized to ensure that we provide them with the funding available.
Other questions from other committee members at this time? Dr. Titus?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and I apologize that I had to step out, and I especially apologize if this question's already been explained, but we heard earlier on housing funding that 1% of the total program cost was administrative, which is more than reasonable, and on this program, it was 15% of the total programming has been spent on general administrative costs, and you may have already explained that, but what I want to hear most is going forward, when you actually start getting some of this money in a position of help, is it still going to be 15% overhead?
Well, the 15%, Varice Campbell again for the record, the 15% is over the lifetime of the program, and that percentage will fluctuate. Of course, when you're rolling out a program of this magnitude, there is a higher administrative cost on the front end. So we do expect for it to smooth out as time goes on.
And when you say smooth out, so it's not going to get higher than 15%? Do you think it's going to come back down to a 1% cost?
Well, I don't think it'll ever be a 1% cost, but I do believe that realistically, it could theoretically come in somewhere between 13 and 15%. We are, through the systems we've developed, the portal, we are already seeing a savings as far as the number of staffing. If you'll note on the budget that we actually provided to the committee, we are actually spending at a much slower rate than we had anticipated because of the cost savings that we are seeing with not having to hire as many staff on this front end as we thought we would need at this point in time.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate the other question that talked about the matrix to see how successful you are, because we certainly have spent some money on this, but yet none have been completed, no applications have been completed. So really looking forward to hopefully this is successful, and hopefully we can hear from you in the future that yes, this is what we've accomplished. So thank you for the question, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. Are there other questions from other members at this time? If not, I do have a question. So, you know, I have a lot of folks that call looking for assistance, and I'm just kind of wondering what type of outreach is being done so that folks know that you're there. If someone would call 211, would you be listed with them, and would 211 be referring them to you so that they could fill out the application? Because we have a lot of folks who are approaching that at the very beginning of the pandemic. Their banks were willing to work with them and take a couple payments and put it on the end of the loan. They're not quite as willing to work with folks right now. So we do have some folks that are struggling. How do they find you?
Again, Varice Campbell for the record. We do have numerous outreach measures going on right now. We recently started television commercials. There is also a radio campaign that is due to start. We've also partnered with at least 4 housing counseling agencies, and they will be holding events throughout the state. So there are multiple resources. We're also looking to partner with organizations such as 211 to make sure we get the word out as much as possible.
And thank you. I would hope that you do, because that's how folks call to find assistance. If you're on 211, you will get a lot of people reaching out to you. It's been very valuable and very effective over the last couple of years. So with that, I don't see any other questions or comments. I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. If there's no other questions and comments on item 35, I would take a motion to approve. I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton A second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. And Assemblyman Hafen is an aye, and so the motion passes unanimously. And we can move on to the next agenda item, or the next item under this agenda item. And that is items 45 through 48, 49 through 51, 52 through 53, 55 through 59, and 61 through 66 as a group. And those are all from Health and Human Services, Healthcare Financing, and Policy. And we have, I see Mr. Burrell and Ms. Cullum and Ms. Crecelius. And I'm hoping I'm reading correctly because my eyes are getting tired. So if you want to go ahead and walk us through briefly that grouping of work programs, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Philip Burrell, Deputy Administrator for the Division for Healthcare Financing and Policy. With me today are our subject matter experts for the Home and Community-Based Services Spending Plan Initiative. The 22 work programs here today for your review and approval are all specifically for the Home and Community-Based Services programs. They're the continuation of the program as per the approved 6 work programs at the February IFC that came through this committee. These work programs all help to strengthen and enhance the services available to Nevadans to help keep them in their homes and communities where appropriate. And this is a program that is specific to Section 9817 of the American Rescue Plan Act, where it provided the Medicaid programs of the country an ability for a 10% FMAP increase, which is the FMAP stands for the Federal Medical Assistance Percentage, to allow additional expenditures to be drawn down for additional efforts in the home and community-based services section. There are no state general funds that are requested through any of these 22 work programs here today. And I will pause there to see if there's any questions, and we're happy to provide additional details on any of the work programs.
All right, thank you, Ms. Burrell. I know we have a couple of questions, and I think a couple questions from Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, with reference to the first, I believe it's the first 2 programs, maybe 45 through 48. Specifically related to the self-directed program that was included in AB 495. Can you talk about how that program will be managed following the termination of the temporary contracted positions included in this?
Good afternoon, Phil Burrell, Deputy Administrator for the record. Yes, that program will be a continuation of the projects and activities related to our existing work with our long-term care and supportive services unit. While we're utilizing the efforts and abilities from the work programs brought to you here today for additional efforts that include contractual staff and activities associated, we're also planning to continue to enhance our efficiencies with monitoring and management of the activities and programs. So we'll be using our contracted staff through the ability we have for the funds for this temporary initiative. And then after that, we'll be working through efficiencies to continue the programs and efforts.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question, if I may, it has to do with agenda items 253 and 263, specifically related to the home delivery meal service. Can you talk about what will happen to those populations who are being served under this program beyond the 2023 extension of this program? And so when this this funding is gone, how will you guys handle that population who's being served?
Good afternoon, Kirsten Cohen for the record. So there is funding available through Aging and Disability Services through the Older Americans Act. And so this is funding that we have, Nevada has
a long time just wanted to put forth budgetary requests for, and unfortunately weren't able to do so previously. And so when this opportunity came through the American Rescue Plan Act specific to home and community-based services, that was one of our priorities. And so we're excited to get this program started. And, you know, as able, we would need to have a budget request for that to continue it through our frail elder waiver. It will still always be available for individuals that have physical disabilities. And, you know, as Ms. Schmidt had mentioned, Aging does have Older Americans Act funding that would also be available for this population as well.
Does that, so that there's an existing federal program that we could apply for once this is stood up? Is that what I'm understanding? And so would we have a state match that would be included in your future budgets?
So the Older Americans Act funding is, it would be separate funding that is then what we would have as a Medicaid service. And so there are different program requirements and, you know, that would be different than with our Medicaid services. So that is our funding that's already available through Aging and Disability. If we wanted to add this service as a permanent service through Nevada Medicaid for elders, we would include that in the Nevada Medicaid budget and need that budget authority.
Is your intention to continue it on?
I will defer to Mr. Burrell.
So part of the efforts with the Home Community-Based Services Spending Initiative is allowing us to work more closely with ADSD, our partner agencies, on some of these efforts. And specifically, this is one of those good examples. As we went through the agency manager work programs earlier, a few minutes ago, this is another one where we're going to talk and work with our sister agency to figure out what we want to do for sustainability efforts, to figure out to work within our budgets, how we can try to continue efforts. We're using this as Ms. Coulon mentioned, our Kickstart funding to really get efforts in this initiative because they haven't been able to be achieved before, and then working with our partner agencies to figure out budget implications and how do we try to work through our state processes for sustainability efforts.
Thank you. Understood. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Any other questions on this group of items? Vice Chair Carlton.
Thank you very much. So I'm looking in my notes here, and I'm looking at 26.9% supplemental payment to providers of intellectual and developmental disability waiver services, another 15%. So we're going to be raised, and I understand where these folks are and where these payments, you're calling them supplemental payments. Does that mean that they're going to be temporary as long as this funding lasts, and then it'll revert back to the original funding? And I'm concerned that once you start giving people funding, they can really justify keeping it in the future. So if you could address those two issues.
Yes, ma'am. Phil Burrell, Deputy Administrator, Division for Healthcare Finance and Policy, for the record. Yes, so the supplemental payment programs here that you presented are exactly that. They are the temporary efforts that we were able to utilize through the spending program. That's, of course, temporary in nature. We actually have the ability to do expenditures through March of 2024. So part of our public workshops prior to the development of the initial spending plan for home and community-based services was the outreach from our providers and community recipients about rates and funds to go into the community. So our response through research and talking with other states was an opportunity to do so through these supplemental programs. By nature, because this is a temporary effort, we can do a rate increase that comes with much more because these are reinvestment funds only. They're not state general funds being pulled into it. But we wanted to definitely respond to the feedback we got from the community specific to these efforts and try to move as much dollars we could from the reinvestment funds to support those efforts. So yes, ma'am, these are going to be supplemental. They are going to be temporary in nature. And we're going to continue to push the funds out as much as we can through the available funds to the community.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, but knowing what has happened in the past when things like this has happened is people will show up and say they got a rate cut. They won't deal with the fact that it is a supplemental payment and it is a temporary payment. So I wish you luck in the future in dealing with those folks when they reach out and say their rates got cut. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Carlton. You notice how she said she wishes us luck in the future because she's not going to be here. But she's very familiar with what the problem is going to be. So any other questions on item 80? I'm sorry. On all those items. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. On that batch of items. Any other questions from the committee? All right, I see none. And thank you very much for coming in and walking us through that this afternoon. I take a motion to pass, and I'm gonna read it so that we get it right here in the record. But items 45 through 48, 49 through 51, 52, 53, 55 through 59, and 61 through 66.
So moved.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton and a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussion on that motion? I do not see any discussion on the motion. All in favor, aye. Aye. Assemblyman Hafen is an aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with those present. And we can move on to item 84. And we have with us Ms. Bennett from DPBH, and it looks like we're also joined with Ms. Finney from DPBH. And welcome this afternoon. And we have this work program in front of us. And if it's okay, I just want to jump right into the questions because it's getting kind of late. And I think that we can get to the bottom of the questions. I have the first question, I think, is has the department received any preliminary indication from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Systems Administration about whether or not that the grant period extension request will be approved?
Good afternoon. This is Cody Finney for the record, and the department has received preliminary indication that extension request will be approved. We do not have a formal approval at this point just yet.
Thank you, but preliminary indication that it will be approved. Okay, thank you. And I think Senator Harris has a question as well.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. I've noted in the work program documents that you have you've stated that new management and a grant manager have been brought on to kind of help ensure that this doesn't happen again. Can you guys just go into a little bit more detail about what went wrong and what changes, aside from hiring 2 other people, will be made in order to ensure that we use the dollars as quickly as possible?
Thank you, Cody Finney, for the record. I'll start, and I know Ms. Bennett will have additional detail to add. We did point out that the division is devoting a great deal of resource to this bureau in particular. During the pandemic, we had a lot of reliance on contractors, and we were trying to do a lot of things very quickly. At this point, we're moving out of that crisis management mode and really focusing on making sure we have good balance between the urgent clinical issues of keeping people alive and keeping people from overdosing, and making sure that all of those services are getting planned and put out into the community, and also the balance of having documentation and appropriate oversight and monitoring. We're working, Shannon and I in particular are working on making sure that we're analyzing the roles that the bureau staff are playing, the roles that the contract staff are playing. We've had a lot of support from the division fiscal group, who you just saw join us in the room, to get these things back on track. That includes the hiring of an additional 2 people, but it also included really bringing in some reestablishing some processes between the division and the bureau. We've had an enormous number of new people. So some of us now that are here have had a little bit more experience with some of those processes. And we're working to strengthen that and make sure that all of that is in the proper alignment. I'll stop there. We're all getting tired, but Ms. Bennett may have details that she'd like to add.
Thank you, Ms. Finney. Shannon Bennett for the record. I'm the healthcare chief for the Bureau of Behavioral Health, Wellness, and Prevention. I think the only other thing that I would add in addition to everything that Ms. Finney has outlined is according to a recent Government Accountability Organization report, this is relatively normal. We're seeing this in other states where we're unable to spend down all of the grants, and we're able to, and SAMHSA is aware of that as well, and we're able to carry that forward into throughout the grant. So we're able to carry like the first year of the grant into the second year of the grant and then request a no cost extension as well. And that's what we're anticipating in this case. So I just wanted to point that out, and we'd be happy to share that report with you afterwards as well.
Thank you for that response. Assemblywoman Tolles.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just curious also in line with how we're managing federal dollars. I'm vice chair of the Substance Use Working Group, statewide Substance Use Working Group, and as you know, we just were awarded $284 million in the opioid settlement dollars. Is there any concern that we will face some similar management issues in regards to allocating? I know part of that is we have two committees working on making those recommendations for how to allocate those dollars, but is there any concerns that we do not have the adequate management and staffing to be able to funnel those dollars appropriately? Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Cody Finney, for the record. We do have some additional staff in addition to those that I've pointed out that are working on those functions that you bring up. So it is incredibly important that we succeed in making sure we put these functions in place and have a good solid structure. But the opioid settlement structure is also being strengthened and reinforced at the same time. So I think we can take the lessons we're learning here and make sure that we don't have those challenges. That being said, changing the way that recovery services are provided is not a fast endeavor. And there's a lot of hard work to be done in making sure that providers feel comfortable using MAT. When I started working in this industry, that was practically unheard of. It was only abstinence work. So the field has changed an enormous amount, and we continue to work with the field to help move us forward and make sure that we can get all of the Nevadans that need that support, the support they need to get to recovery, because it does work, but it's really hard to get there.
Thank you for that response and that interesting sidebar. And I think it's going to definitely be, I think Assemblywoman Tolles brings up a really good point on managing resources and having the resources to manage. So any other questions on this work program? All right, so seeing none, I would take a motion to approve 84. I have a motion and a second, a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussion on the motion? All right, no discussion on the motion. All in favor, aye? Aye. And Assemblyman Hafen's an aye. Any opposed? None opposed, so motion passes unanimously with the members present. Thank you for helping us today and joining us this afternoon and helping us through this work program. And we can move on now to the next work programs. It is item 114, and it will be heard with item O10B. And for 114, joining us, we have Director Julie Butler from DMV, and we also have Administrator Lennon, and I think we might have somebody from Mission Critical Partners if necessary. And so would you please, Director Butler, if you could just walk us through that very quickly. And so it's getting late, and we're getting near the end, but we still have a lot of things we got to get done. And so if we can just be as clear and concise as possible, not trying to conceal anything, or and you always get to be at the end, and I always make that same request. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but you can go ahead and start us off.
Thank you, Chair Brooks, and members of the committee. Julie Butler for the record. I'm going to have Molly Lennon, our administrator of our Research and Project Management Division, present this work program and the letter of intent, accompanied by Robert Kalin, our consultant with Mission Critical Partners, who is providing quality assurance and independent validation and verification to make sure we're doing what we said we were going to do. So with that, I'll turn it over to Molly. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, Molly Lennon, DMV Administrator of Research and Project Management and the DMV Transformation Effort. This work program requests the transfer of $22,419,199 from the reserve category to the required implementation cost category to continue funding the DMV transformation effort. DMV requests approval of this work program to establish authority starting July 1st to continue paying expenditures due to executed contracts, ongoing expenditures, and anticipated contracts in support of the DMV transformation effort. Approval will allow the DMV to continue with the transformation project funded by the 21 legislature. Program updates have been provided via the LOI for reporting period July 1st, 21 through December 31st, 21, in accordance with actions taken by the 21 legislature, and a more recent update was provided March 17th. And out of respect for everyone's time, I will keep it brief, and we are here to answer any questions you might have.
I appreciate that, and we do have some questions. I have first up, I have Senator Dennis, and then after that, I have Senator Dundaro-Loop, and then if anyone else does, they can jump in line. So go ahead, Senator Dennis.
Thank you. So you kind of just talked about it a little bit, but maybe a little bit more detail on the update on the effort of the transformation stuff. The transformation effort project. You just sort of alluded to it, but can you give us more specifics on how it's going?
Sure. Molly Lennon for the record. The LOI that we provided for the reporting period ending in December, there's been a lot of additional work done since that period of time. We have been working very closely with Mission Critical Partners, our cloud solution providers, Slalom, MuleSoft, and Salesforce, to get to the point where we are now in reviewing our overall roadmap for the program. We have approved deliverables for current state assessment and test strategy and planning. There are multiple deliverables under review now, including that roadmap. Our DTE staffing report to this point includes 39 filled positions of the 50 approved positions. 8 of those were base, 21 FTEs, and 21 MSAs. We've completed discovery on our CED case management project, and that kicked off February 14th. The capabilities built for that project within Salesforce will be used for future work streams as a part of DTE, including case management features, e-signature, digital form acceptance, et cetera. We have completed an assessment for mainframe migration, which was beneficial in support of road mapping and highlighting impacts to DTE with our current architecture. We've done a lot of public outreach, focus groups. We put a survey out in which we received over 18,000 responses for public input, which confirmed that we are providing the transactions that they are looking for. We're providing the capabilities that they are looking for going forward. We have completed governance models for all initiatives within the DMV portfolio, and that includes anything that will impact us throughout the DTE program, from our current portfolio, legislative session, which is approaching, current contracts that are expiring. And we have, as I mentioned, we are reviewing the roadmap now, but we have prioritized our first lifts for program increment 1 and 2. And that is loosely the first 2 years, but that will adjust. We are working in an agile methodology, and we have high level prioritized program increment 3 and 4. And those will be further outlined in the roadmap as we have additional sessions. I will stop there and see if there are any questions specifically. There's been a lot of work done, and I could go on and on.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Real quick, I got another question, but before that, just to follow up on that one, you mentioned the transition from the mainframe. Is it your intent to just switch over? Is there like a cutoff date, or are you going to do a parallel thing for a bit until you know that everything's going to work?
Thank you, Molly Lennon, for the record. What the assessment for the mainframe migration showed us is that the cost is not something that we want to take on to just do a lift and shift. So we are going to work our way through and mitigate our costs against the mainframe and take a very close look at our processes as we lift our transactions online. Eventually, we will be moving off of the mainframe, but it's going to be parallel with the program.
Okay, great, thanks. So the other question I had, and you talked about this in your presentation, you've got those positions that you're filling, and there's been a delay in being able to fill all of them. Is that going to create a delay in finishing the project?
Molly Lennon, for the record, thank you for the question. No, to this point, we have not had any delays due to staffing issues. The department was very deliberate about defining the skill sets that we required for implementation of this project. And we do, as you heard, have a handful left to fill. And those are areas that we know we're going to need to work with. But in the meantime, we are working side by side with our partners at Slalom and Salesforce. So any capabilities we couldn't provide up to this point, they have supplemented. And we are utilizing our in-house IT staff as well as our business staff in a way that we haven't in the past. And it's allowed us to continue forward meeting all of our milestones and timelines up to this point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. Senator Dondero Loop. And hey, let's keep those answers concise.
Okay, I'll keep the question concise. Would you please let us know how what contributed to that increased cost projection and the anticipated implementation timeline for the transformation effort?
Sure, Molly Lennon, for the record. So the overall increase, I'm assuming you're talking about, is the 9.4 million for the entire project. That increase was comprised of additional slalom effort to keep them at full capacity for the entire program, rather than tapering them off earlier as we had initially anticipated. It also includes increased maintenance cost on Salesforce licenses, EATS mainframe costs, and the remaining was for various operational software products not in the original budget. The other 400,000 is spread out amongst other categories and line items. As far as the timeline is concerned, again, we are working in an agile methodology. Our inclination is that we will lift as many transactions as possible online. We're working in two-week sprints so that we'll be able to introduce new features consistently to the public. But the timeline itself will comprise as many of those online functions as possible, and then DMV will continue past that 2025 end date of the program and lift anything that is left in our product backlog.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Do we have any other questions on item 114? All right. Thank you very much, Director Butler. Thank you, Ms. Lennon and Mr. Kalin, for coming in today and answering any questions and for providing that update. All right. So with that, I would take a motion to approve item 114. And so I have a motion from Senator Dennis. I have a second from Vice Chair Carlton. Any discussion on the motion? All right. No discussion on the motion. All in favor, aye. Aye. And Mr. Hafen is hidden behind DMV somewhere. Any opposed, nay? And I believe Mr. Assemblyman Hafen, if you can hear me, say yes or no. All right, cool. I think we must have lost Mr. Hafen, or Assemblyman Hafen. So the motion passes with all the members present, and we can move on to the next agenda item. Thank you very much for coming in this evening. And 119 was pulled and was withdrawn. And that wraps up agenda item G1 and G2. And we can move on then to agenda item H, which is a statement of contingency account balance. And we have Mr. Thorley here to go over the statement of a contingency account balance. And you have that in your packet of materials as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The statement of contingency account balance can be found in volume 4 of your meeting materials, beginning on page 385 under tab H. I'll be very quick. Fiscal staff, I just want to let everyone know that we did update the look and feel of this the statement to make it more readable and understandable. The first change that we made on page 185 on the summary statement is we removed all the rows related to the prior fiscal year, so fiscal year FY21. What remains now are all the actions, the beginning balance and appropriations for the current fiscal year, FY22, all the allocations and actions approved by this body for this fiscal year. So what you'll see, if you look at the total column then, on page 385, the total balance in the contingency account is $29.6 million. Prior to the actions of the IFC today, there are 2 requests for allocations from the restricted general fund, and that totals $641,395. If both those items are approved, there will be a total of just under $29 million remaining in the contingency account. I'd also just point out on the summary pages of the statement on page 386 and 387 of your meeting materials, you'll notice that we've changed this a bit. We've changed it to landscape instead of portrait orientation. We moved some information down to footnotes, which allowed us to get more information on a single page. So it's all the same information, it's just we changed how it's presented, and hopefully it's better, it's easier to understand. And if anybody has any questions, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Do we have any questions from the committee on the statement of a contingency account balance? And I do appreciate the new format. It makes it just a little easier to kind of understand. I see none, so that doesn't need action, does it? That's just an informational item. So that takes us to agenda item I, and we have 2 on there, I1 and 2. And I would like to hear I1 with agenda item 08. And that is Dieter, the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation. And I see that we have Director Caffaretta with us today. And I think we might also have, we have Mr. Ellis and Mr. Martinez and Mr. Sewell. Is that who we have? All right. We have the whole team. So I'm just going to jump in to any questions that we might have on that, if that's okay, and then you can answer those. And I believe Assemblywoman Gorlow might have a question on those 2 items.
I do, thank you, Chair. Could you provide a status update on the vocational rehabilitation client services? And do you also anticipate requesting an additional allocation from the IFC contingency account?
This is Director Caffaretta, and I'll start by providing just a super high-level comment, which is, as many of you will remember at the last legislative session, we needed to provide some additional clarity around the cost per client and the number of clients served before we came back to you with this request. Because we use these general fund dollars to draw down 4-to-1 match from the federal government. So we have provided 2 quarterly reports to you, which I hope you have received. in response to the letter of intent, and that's what item O, number 8, is one of those reports. So we have been providing that detail to you. I will let Drazen Ellis kind of give you the high level from that report and give you his thinking on whether we will have another request after this one.
Thank you, Director Caprera, Mr. Chair, and also Vice Chair. So currently, just to directly answer that, the first question, we are not anticipating asking any additional funds through the rest of the year. At this point, we are able to fully serve all of the clients that are seeking our services. And as in last legislative session, we had some concerns about potentially going into order of selection and that impacting our agency. At this point, we are at no risk of entering the order of selection for any kind of foreseeable future, and we are able to serve all the clients that come to our door. Over the past couple of years, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, we've seen a certain decrease in our need for services. That a lot of individuals were anxious about possibly going back to workforce, but in the last couple of months, we've definitely seen much more increase in folks seeking our services and in the number of applications.
Thank you. If that satisfied your question, Assemblywoman Gorlow, and is there any other questions from the committee? All right, thank you for keeping the status update, and thank you for coming in here and sharing that with us this afternoon. And I believe so. Yeah, about current future money ask. Yeah, they just did. Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. A little sidebar. We're trying to make sure that the question got answered, and it did. So I appreciate that. So any other questions? So seeing no other questions, I'd look for a motion to approve item I1 and 08. Thank you. 08 is just the report back to us and informational. So I just need an item I1. I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton and a motion, second of that motion from Senator Dennis. And any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion passes unanimously with the members present. Thank you. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We'll move on to our next agenda item. Next agenda item is going to be I2. And I2 is from the Department of Indigent Defense Services, a request for an allocation to reimburse for $26,360 to reimburse Douglas, Lyon, and White Pine counties for costs exceeding the maximum contribution amount these counties must pay for the provision of indigent defense services. And we don't have necessarily any questions on that. And we have available, though, Executive Director Ryba, if anyone does have any questions. But committee, do we have any questions on that particular request? All right. Well, thank you for being on standby, Director Ryba. And seeing no questions, we can move for approval of item I2. So I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton and a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussion on that motion? No discussion on the motion. All in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present. Thank you again, Ms. Ryba, for being on standby all day. And that takes us to agenda item J. And agenda item J is a request for transfer from the grant matching account pursuant to section 1.5 of Assembly Bill 489 and from the 2019 legislative session as amended by section 29.3 of Assembly Bill 445 of the 2021 legislative session for the Department of Administration, Office of Grant Procurement, Coordination, and Management, the request for approval to transfer $225,217 to the City of Las Vegas to cover costs supporting the Culinary Training and Leadership Academy grant. And so I don't know that we had any questions beforehand, but do any of the members have any questions on that request? All right, I see no questions, so thank you for joining us and being here to answer any questions that we do not have, but it's good seeing you again. No questions, and so I take a motion to approve item J. And so I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present. Thank you again for joining us, and on to the next one. So, agenda item K. And agenda item, we're going to hear K1 and K2. Actually, I don't know that we're going to hear them. We're going to take items K1 and K2 together. No one expressed any questions before the committee or the meeting on these particular items. Does anyone on the committee have any questions on items K1 and K2, which is a request, two requests from the State Public Works Division, and it's a request to accept and expend $575,000 in federal FEMA grant funds for the Office of Military Division of Emergency Management for CIP Project 19M07. And then it is also a request to modify the scope of CIP Project 21C04, Cave Creek Dam Rehabilitation at the Cave Lake State Park. Do we have any questions from the committee on those two items? I do. Vice Chair Carlton, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And if you'd have told me years ago I'd be interested in CIPs, I'd have laughed. But now I kind of am. So I'm just trying to remember, we changed a couple different provisions within Public Works to be able to move some money around and to be able to do some of the work. So I guess I really want to understand what the change is on this. It says an emergency generator, so I don't remember if this was one of the ones we discussed last session or where we were with this. So if you could just kind of fill us in on this one a little bit, please.
Absolutely. This is Kent Lefevre, Deputy Administrator of Public Works. And I think the ones you're referring to are the 21M02 projects, which were HHS projects grouped together as a statewide. This particular project, K1, is to expend and receive additional FEMA money, federal emergency management money on this project, should we need it.
Thank you very much. You've jogged my memory. I think I'm fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to take any more time. I can ask my other questions offline. Thank you.
No problem, Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lefevre. Do we have any questions from the committee? Other questions from the committee? All right, I don't see any, so I'd get a motion for to approve K1 and 2. So moved. I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion on the motion. All in favor, aye. 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 Any opposed, nay. And that motion passes unanimously with the members present, and we can move on. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight and answering our questions. All right. Now, on to agenda item L. We've already addressed agenda item L1, and which takes us to agenda item L2. And with us, just in case we have any questions, is Administrator Donahue and from the Division of State Lands. And this is a State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Division of State Lands request for approval to accept a gift of certain surface and groundwater rights from Clark County on behalf of Nevada Department of Wildlife to support the restoration, management, and maintenance of water resources for fish and wildlife in southern Nevada. I don't have any questions. We didn't have any questions from the committee beforehand, but I just want to, this is an interesting gift and grant. So that's kind of, Senator Gocochea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to be in Austin at midnight, so I'll be very, very brief. But again, these water rights would have to be, I assume, Mr. Donahue, transferred to go through the transfer process. I'm just kind of curious what the beneficial use is.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Charlie Donahue for the record. The actual beneficial use is for wildlife, the benefit of wildlife. Clark County is donating these water rights, and it's a combination of surface as well as groundwater rights, sir, to the state for the benefit of wildlife, and they're coming from the Desert Conservation Program. The points of diversion are dispersed in the McCullough Range, east of Prim, west of Searchlight, as well as south of Bunkerville.
Yes, I understand that, and thank you, Mr. Donahue. But again, there's already a reservation on all water rights for wildlife, and I'm just concerned. I'm just wondering if, in fact, there has to be actually a transfer application and a manner of use in place with this.
Yeah.
At some point, do you have to file that?
Thank you for the question, Senator Charlie Donahue. Clark County will be filing those on behalf of the state. And if we were ever not to utilize these water rights for their intended purpose, the state would be on the hook to transfer them back to Clark County.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Gocochea, and thank you, Mr. Donahue. Any other questions on item L2? All right, I would take a motion to approve item L2. I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, a second from Senator Dennis, and any discussion on the motion? I do not see any discussion, so all in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. And motion passes unanimously with members present, and we can move on to the next item. Thanks again, Mr. Donahue. And that is item L3, Office of the Military, Division of Emergency Management. Excuse me, that's item 3A and B, and the first request is for approval to accept a FEMA grant funding of $4,647,901 to cover emergency response and recovery associated with the January 2017 Northern Nevada flood. And the second is a 3B, which is a request for approval to accept a FEMA grant, hazard mitigation grant program funding of $13,584,381 to provide funding for the state's enhanced multi-hazard mitigation plan project. And so with us this afternoon, we have the Division of Emergency Management, Mr. Franco and Mr. Beckenball. And we didn't necessarily have any questions. And I just want to see if the committee has any questions right now while we have these resources available to us. All right. What's that?
I have one quick question.
Vice Chair Carlton has a question. Please go ahead.
And thank you very much. And real briefly, so we know it takes a long time to get reimbursed. Is this the full reimbursement, or is there going to be another tranche of money coming? Is there another reimbursement due in the future?
Thank you, ma'am. John Backetall for the record from the Division of Emergency Management. I'm the Deputy Administrator. This is a particular reimbursement for existing projects. There could potentially be some additional ones that trickle in, but we are looking to close this actual incident by September of this year.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. So no other questions. So I'd look for a motion to approve item L3, A and B. I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussion on the motion? There's no discussion on the motion. All in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present, and we can move on to item L4, A, B, C, D, and E from the Department of Wildlife. And we should have available to us today Director Wasley, Mr. Robb, Ms. Long, Mr. Scott, and Mr. Jenny, and to answer any questions we might have. We don't have any identified questions or issues, but these are all just really briefly. This is 4A is a request to accept a donation from Elko Bighorns Unlimited for $25,000. Item B is a request for approval to accept a donation from Nevada Bighorns Unlimited for $30,000, and a request for approval to accept a donation from Nevada Gold Mines in the amount of $100,000 for fire prevention and rehabilitation, and a request to accept a donation from KG Mining Bald Mountain, Inc. in the amount of $93,000 to cover costs of restoration to conserve mule deer and their habitats. And lastly, a request to accept a donation from Newmont USA in the amount of $48,750 for the Taylor Creek Riparian Restoration Project. Any questions from the members on those 5 requests to accept gifts and grants? All right, I see none. So let's thank you for hanging in there with us. And we don't have any questions, but I'm sure you're going to do great things with these gifts and grants. So I would take a motion to approve all 5 items, 4, A, B, C, D, E.
Motion to approve, and thank you very much for the donations.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussion on the motion? None. All in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present. Thank you so much, Nevada Department of Wildlife team. Let's talk to you soon. That takes us to our next item, which is item M. And agenda item M is a request for approval of lease of state land pursuant to NRS 322.007 from the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Division of State Lands. This request on behalf of the Department of Health and Human Services to lease property to the nonprofit organization Capability Health and Human Service to be used to provide health and human services programs. We didn't have necessarily any issues associated with that, but we have Mr. Donahue from State Lands here still with us, and also it looks like a administrator, and then we have Ellery Stoller as well. And any questions from the committee on item M, this request? I do not see any questions, so thank you for sticking around, Mr. Donahue. And with no questions, I would take a motion to approve item M. I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussion on the motion? There's no discussion on the motion. All in favor, aye. Aye. All approved, nay. All opposed, nay. So, no opposition. Motion passes unanimously with the members present, and we can move on to the next item. Thank you again, Mr. Donahue. Item N. And N is a request for approval of expenditures from the account for maintenance of state parks pursuant to NRS 407.0762, 4B, State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Division of State Parks. And this is two requests, a request of approval to spend $80,000 for replacement of the fuel pumps at Lahontan State Recreation Area, and a request for approval to spend $30,000 for the construction of a permanent cabin to house seasonal staff at Beaver Dam State Park. We did not identify any issues or questions in reviewing the work program, but while we have you here, do any of the members have any questions for Ms. Keller from the State Parks or Ms. Adema from State Parks? We have no questions. Thank you for hanging in with us, and thank you for the work program. And we will, I would take a motion then to approve item N1 and 2. I have a motion to approve from Vice Chair Carlton and a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussion on the motion? There is no discussion on the motion. All in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously with the members present, and we will move on to item O, informational items. Now, we pulled in item O, we had O, 6, 8, and 10B. We've already covered 8 and 10B in previous items that we heard those together with, and so that'll move on to O6. And so O6 is a item from the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs, Division of Tourism, about the Nevada magazine. And I think we have one question on that, and it looks like with us today we have Ms. Matheson and Mueller, Ms. Mueller, to answer any questions that we might have. And I believe Assemblywoman Peters has a question. And I have a recommendation. And I'll go with my recommendation. As a result of kind of some of these financial issues, let's just make it free and put it in the budget.
I'm out.
I like it. Thank you, Chair. Can you please provide efforts and progress that the department has made towards the financial stability of the magazine?
This is Meg Mueller for the record. I'm the executive editor of the magazine, sitting in for Director Scolari. The new product has just come out. We're 2 issues in right now, and we've already seen an increase in our advertising revenue by about 10-15% over last year. So it's a work in progress. Our advertising rates are going up as well. So again, we're very new in the process, only 2 issues in, but things are moving in the right direction.
Can you give us just a little metric of what that increase is looking like? Order of magnitude is fine. Are you seeing a 10% increase in revenue from advertising, a 30%? Where can you give us anything? Oh, did they say it?
Yeah, Meg Mueller for the record.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, again, Meg Mueller for the record. It was, we've increased, our advertising percentage has gone up. I want to say 15%. I'm a word person, not a math person. From about 75,000 per issue, we've already reached 90,000 per issue for our fall issue, which is about to come up. So doing very well.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Peters. And we have a question from Vice Chair Carlton as well.
And so I was just wondering, so you're doing the print version and you're doing the digital version. Have you analyzed, as far as the advertising portion, which one does the best? I'm just wondering why we just don't go thoroughly digital, put QR codes in every hotel room that link to the magazine as it comes up every month, and just get rid of the paper. So have you analyzed that?
Meg Mueller for the record. No, that hasn't been analyzed. It's an interesting question. I know there's a lot of issues with getting into hotels in Nevada and with publications. The print product right now is by far and away the revenue driver. The magazine, the digital issue of the magazine, the ad sales are much lower than they are online, just because the web issue, sorry, there's my dog. The web
After today, we need a little more companionship in this committee, so thank you for your puppy for showing up. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. So yeah, it is the, as I say, the print product is the leader on the clubhouse wall for ad sales for sure.
Okay, thank you. So that gives credence to, let's just keep printing it. If it's working, why mess with it? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions on item 06? I see no other questions, and so it's informational item only, so no action will be taken. So I really appreciate you coming and hanging in there to be the very last people that we have to ask questions to tonight. And so thanks for hanging in there, and huge fan of the publication, and I even like the glossy printed version of it, but that's an interesting concept, and maybe an online, we should talk about that. And I also still think it should be free, and you could just just bake it into the budget, but so thank you, and we'll move on to our very last agenda item of the evening, and that is public comment. And at 5:30 p.m. here in Carson City, do we have anybody who wants to come up and give us a public comment? We do not. So broadcast services, do we have anybody on the phones? And I'd like to remind anyone on the phones that if it's 2 minutes per caller, please.
Sorry about that, Chair. To provide public comment, please press raise hand in your Zoom window or *9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Once again, to speak on the matter at hand, please press raise hand in your Zoom window or star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue for public comment. Chair, at this time, the line is open and working, but we have no one wishing to give public comment at this time.
Thank you, Broadcast Services. I just want to thank all of the staff, the fiscal staff, and all the policy analysts, and everybody at Broadcast Services, and everybody at the LCB who makes these meetings possible. And thank you for hanging in there with us, and thank you for preparing us as best as you can. And also like to thank all the members of the Interim Finance Committee and a citizen legislature that takes off in the middle of the week and leaves their job and their family behind to come up here and serve the people of Nevada. And it's always a privilege and a pleasure to serve right beside you. And so with that, May 5th is virtual. Yes, and thank you, Vice Chair. We have a not regularly scheduled IFC meeting that we scheduled so that we could accommodate some of the work programs coming in under the $100 million item that we set aside today. And so we will be hearing and seeing work programs on that on May 5th. And that will be 100% virtual. And that one, I knock on wood, is not going to be quite as long as this one. But the work programs are still coming in. And so with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all so much.